Welcome to Time Monk Radio. I'm Gemini, and we explore digestion in the gut, including flora, absorption of nutrients, and flatulence fighters. Welcome back, Susan.
Oh, I'm so glad to be here with you again, Gemini.
Thank you. And tonight we're going to go further into the gut to discuss flora and absorption of nutrients.
Yes, indeed. We have made the long and perilous journey past the guardians of our lives, the sense of smell and the sense of taste. We've gotten our food down our esophagus and into the stomach and dealt with by the stomach and moved into the small intestine and the beginning of the small intestine and passes very important players of digestion, the liver, the pancreas, and the gallbladder, so that we now have all of the components needed to break down all of the food that we have eaten. So that is really, in a way, that is digestion. We often use the word digestion to be the equivalent of assimilation. Like, I'm going to go home and digest that. But, in fact, we should be going home to assimilate things. A really good teacher digests the material so that the student can assimilate. And so far, we really have been talking about what goes on that digests the food in the mouth, in the stomach, and then in the beginning of the small intestine. And as we move out of the beginning of the small intestine and into the very long amount of other small intestine, we are starting to look at the second phase, shall we call it, of digestion, which is assimilation. Not just breaking down what we got, but actually getting it out and into the body. Now, anatomically, if you look at the small intestine, one of the first things that immediately strikes anyone is the enormous, enormous number of small blood vessels going to the small intestine. And there's material kind of like saran wrap, which is over and kind of in and through the intestines. And this saran wrap-like material, it just is completely covered with blood vessels that go right into the small intestine. When we get to the large intestine, there are far fewer blood vessels, and they tend to be larger blood vessels. And around all of these small blood vessels, it looks like somebody has taken like a white highlighter and highlighted them so that it's like white all around them, and that's actually lymphatic tissue. The lymphatic tissue now has become the guardian. Anything that has gotten past the sense of smell and the sense of taste and past the guardianship of the liver. And now the immune system, especially the lymphatic branch of the immune system, is going to be in charge of seeing to it that things are not foes of the body. So that if there's some kind of parasite or some kind of bacteria or some other foodborne pathogen that has somehow managed to get that far down into the digestive system, that now the lymphatic system is going to emphatically take care of that. And this, of course, is where much food poisoning reaction arises. We generally believe when we get food poisoning that it's from a food that we just ate. And yet the vast majority of organisms that cause the reaction that we call food poisoning take days before any symptoms arise. And that's because they are actively fought against here in the small intestine. And the symptoms that we get are the symptoms of our getting rid of it. The vomiting, the diarrhea. This is our body saying, there's a poison here. I'm sorry for the inconvenience, but we must get rid of this right now. One of my favorite herbs for helping when that is going on, of course, is slippery elm. And we talked about slippery elm a couple of weeks ago. And I mentioned that there was no such thing as stomach flu. but that what people call stomach flu truly is food poisoning. Wormwood, one of the bitter herbs, is also a wonderful remedy if you happen to have that on hand to quell the symptoms of food poisoning. And I especially think of wormwood if the person is not just in the acute stage of it, but has been kind of run through with it and is still feeling like kind of down even a day or so afterwards. The wormwood really seems to sweep everything into a pile there so that the body can really help get it going. Now, as we are completing digestion and moving into assimilation, we meet a cast of characters. They really are characters, and there really are hundreds of them. We used to think that there were 300 or 400 different organisms in the gut. The number now is well over 1,000 different organisms found in the human gut. And they say that you could actually fingerprint human beings by their gut flora. We are absolutely individually unique in our gut flora, although our gut flora will often have familial matches, not 100%, because even twins have different influences and do eat slightly different things. But it's very interesting. A lot of work is being done about gut flora these days. And, I talk about the three traditions of healing: the scientific tradition, which measures and fixes; the heroic tradition, which cleanses and balances; and the wise woman tradition, which nourishes the wholeness of the unique individual. And as you can guess, these three traditions do not agree on much. But one thing that they all agree on is that gut flora is critical to health. And having healthy gut flora, thus, is very critical to our health. And it's because the gut flora, of course, help us to both digest and then to move into the assimilation phase of the digestion process. So there are two questions that most of us have when we get to this part in digestion, start to finish, and that is, what hurts my gut flora, and then what helps my gut flora. So let's deal with the first question first, because a lot of people nowadays have heard about probiotics and the idea that probiotics are things that can help your gut flora. Well, I have to say the science is still out on it. Science doesn't really know if eating things that are supposedly probiotics really, if those things get down to the gut. Remember, the stomach is a guardian, and so is the liver. So it may be that those things really don't get down there. In one test, they actually found that in terms of taking the acidophilus, that the products that had killed the acidophilus got more acidophilus into the gut than the ones that had live acidophilus, because the live acidophilus ones tended to trigger an immune system response, which was unwelcome, whereas the dead acidophilus did seem to increase gut flora against all common reason and did not trigger an immune system response. Most of the world's people include in their diets something fermented on a daily basis, whether we're talking beer or kimchi, whether we're talking kombucha or miso. Around the world, kefir, yogurt, something is fermented and taken on a daily basis. Many authors and many of my teachers believe that eating these fermented foods promotes good gut flora. It would make sense, since gut flora is molds and yeasts and bacteria, and fermented foods are usually gotten fermented by the use of molds and yeasts and bacteria. It would make a certain sense. Again, science can't either prove or disprove whether or not the molds and yeast and bacteria and fungi that are in these fermented foods, whether or not they actually get through the stomach, past the guardianship of the stomach, and past the guardianship of the liver. on their way down into the small intestine. What are all those blood vessels doing in the small intestine area? And that is not just bringing blood to the small intestine, but carrying blood away, loaded with nutrition. Because as we digest, we take out the constituents of those foods, and then we need to take them out to the cells so that the cells can actually assimilate them. Well, gut flora, can we improve it? Possibly. We know some things we could possibly eat: homemade beer, homemade wine, food-grade mold like camembert or blue cheese, fermented things like sauerkraut and kombucha. All of these things, yogurt and kefir, can have a positive impact on gut flora. So let's look at the other question. What do we do that has a negative impact, a problematic impact that kills our gut flora? And most people, when asked this question, raise their hand because they know the answer, and their answer is antibiotics. It's true. Mm-hmm. It's absolutely true. I think we talked at some other point about a study where they were looking at phytoestrogens in plants, which literally have to be fermented in the human gut in order to become bioactive hormones in our bodies, and that they could measure the output of this by looking at byproducts in the urine. And after they had done that and kind of gotten a sense of what each woman was putting out, if they gave the women in the study a single dose of antibiotics, then they were not able to bioconvert the phytoestrogens at all. Of course, their ability came back, but just that one dose was enough. So it's true that antibiotics disrupt gut flora. Even if men don't know it, women certainly do, because almost any woman will say, oh, no, antibiotics, that means I'm going to get a yeast infection. So I then ask people, okay, antibiotics can disrupt gut flora. Is there something that is put in water that's put there to make the water safer to drink?
Minerals? I don't know.
Chlorine.
Chlorine, yes. Okay.
Okay. And chlorine is a gas, and water is chlorinated, which kills bacteria. And, of course, water in saunas is often chlorinated. Water in swimming pools is frequently chlorinated. So chlorine is put there to kill bacteria, and so it does a pretty good job of killing gut flora, too. And that's whether we drink it or whether we merely inhale it. In fact, I think the equivalent is 2 to 3 minutes of inhaling chlorine from a swimming pool or a hot shower would be about the same as drinking a glass of chlorinated water. So that's, something that's not too terribly hard to deal with. We can get, a filter for our water that gets the chlorine out of our water, especially out of our shower water. And there are just standalone shower filters that filter the chlorine out. If we don't want to do that, we can boil the water. When I talk about making infusions, I'm always talking about boiling the water for the infusion. And if we boil it in an open container, we're actually, if there's any chlorine in the water, we're actually boiling that chlorine off because it is a gas. And then making our infusion in a closed container, just make sure that there is no chlorine in that. And then I ask people, is there anything that's put in food for the purpose of improving shelf life that might have an adverse effect on gut flora? Like sodium benzoate is frequently added to food, or a synthetic vitamin C, ascorbic acid, is frequently added to food. And these things are added to food as preservatives, as ways to make sure that no bacteria, mold, fungus, yeast can live on that food. And so food preservatives also kill gut flora. After all, that's what their intention is. Their intention is to be antibacterial, antifungal, anti-mold. But I have saved perhaps the scariest one for last. And that is common substances. Many people know about them, made from herbs, but as we will see, actually turned into drugs, so not actually herbs anymore, even though they are made from herbs. And these substances are antibacterial. They are antimicrobial, antifungal. Wow. What are they? Essential oils. So essential oils, in many respects, are as disruptive to gut flora as taking antibiotics is. And I've had people say to me, well, I don't use any essential oils. And I ask them, what do you brush your teeth with? And they almost always mention the toothpaste. And, of course, all toothpaste that I've seen has essential oil in it to flavor it. And we go right through their day. What do they rinse their mouth with, And it's some kind of mouthwash that has essential oils in it. And what do you use to wash your hair? A shampoo with essential oils. And a cream rinse with essential oils, and a body wash with essential oils. And then dry off and put on a body cream that contains essential oils. So we can begin to understand that this person has made it difficult to really nourish themselves because of this barrage of essential oils that greets them every morning and turns down the health of gut flora. In fact, can kill gut flora and make it very difficult to properly digest or assimilate the foods that we have eaten. And most people are kind of shocked by that news. But what I suggest is to, go slowly. You don't have to throw anything out. But as you, are coming to empty on your products that contain essential oils, just ask yourself, what can I replace this with? What can I use instead of that? And that will, I think, help us move through having too much essential oil in our lives. Now, I mentioned that those blood vessels were there in the gut so that they could take away nutrients. And there's an interface there at the gut. Again, let's go back to what we learned about chewing in the mouth. The mouth is lined with mucus. There's a mucus surface, and this is also true in the small intestine, in the gut. And that mucus surface is actually an absorptive surface, so that when our tongue presses against the soft palate, molecules of the food we're eating move into the lymphatic system and are taken down to the liver. Well, as the individual molecules of nutrient are freed up from the food, then a similar thing happens in the small intestine. The muscular action of the small intestine moving, which is technically called peristalsis, doesn't just move the food through the intestines. It also pushes the molecules of absorbable nutrients through the intestinal wall and into those awaiting capillaries, so that the food then moves through the bloodstream to the cells that need it, and those cells uptake that at their receptor sites. So we want this movement through the small intestine. That mucus surface is there because we don't want the intestine walled off from the food. On the other hand, there is a problem called leaky gut. And leaky gut is often caused by the small intestine drying out. And when it gets dehydrated and dried out, then cracks appear in this mucus wall, and molecules of food that are not absorbable and not ready to be utilized by the body can get out through the cracks. This sets up a wide variety of allergic reactions. I have met people who believe that all allergic reactions arise from a leaky gut somewhere in the system. They've said to me, somewhere the plumbing has sprung a leak. There's stuff getting out that shouldn't actually be getting out. And we talked about slippery elm a few weeks ago, and slippery elm helping to relieve acid indigestion. But slippery elm works much deeper down into the gut as well, and it actually can act like a mortar to reseal the surface of the small intestine so that only the molecules that are absorbable are able to be pushed through, and we don't have these, shall we call them, gaping spaces there in the lining of the gut. The human intestine is quite remarkable, very, very interesting, and for most people, transit time from one end to the other runs about 20 or so hours. If we move time zones, this rhythm can get disrupted. If we are eating at odd times, this rhythm can get disrupted. I think I mentioned in our first time together, but if I didn't, let me mention it again, that most people feed their dogs on a far more regular schedule than they feed themselves. And that it is truly helpful for anyone who has any digestive issue to actually eat at the same time every day. And that doesn't have to be all of your meals, but choose one and eat that meal as close as you possibly can to the same time every day. Your digestive system will thank you for it. Now, we've been talking about the gut flora, the things that are living here in the small intestine, the molds, yeast, bacteria, fungi, and so on. And you might wonder what this big troop of things eats. Well, they eat things that are there in your gut because, believe me, there's enough to go around. And one of the things that they primarily eat, being what they are, is they primarily eat sugar. Isn't that what yeast likes to eat? Isn't that what mold and bacteria like?
Mm-hmm.
So we're not just talking white sugar here, we're talking any sugar. Beans, for instance, contain a lot of sugar. And if we soak the beans and toss the soaking water and have soaked the beans with seaweed and cook the beans with seaweed, there's much less free sugar when we eat those beans. And if we don't, then there's a lot of free sugar, and our gut flora chow down on that free sugar and, as a byproduct, create what we call flatulence or gas. It's enough to make some people not want to eat beans because they associate eating beans with, as my 10-year-old friend said, stinking the place out. I was with somebody the other day who was, trying to tell her child that it's, you need to be responsible if indeed you do have flatulence and stink the place out, that you should claim it. And so we were in a very public place, and her child pipes up, "I just farted!"
Oh, no.
So then we had to explain how it's rude to say it really loud in a public place, which I'm sure was so confusing for the child. It's like,
Yes.
They told me to do it. We were in a restaurant,
Oh, my goodness. That's cute.
So there are flatulence fighters. And there are a lot because, of course, this is a common thing. Most of the world's people have beans as a dietary staple, and there's going to be that free sugar in those beans, and our gut flora are going to go, party, plop, and pop the champagne corks, which, as somebody said, it feels like they're popping champagne corks because it feels like an explosion in my gut. The gas can be extremely painful, and there are two ways to go with it. One is a kind of seedy way, and the other is a spicy way. And the seedy way is to make a tea of any kind of aromatic seeds that you like. Most of them are in the same plant family. That would be fennel seed, anise seed, caraway seed, coriander seed, dill seed.
What about cardamom?
Cumin seed. Cardamom is not in the same family, but cardamom seed is a wonderful way to go.
Okay.
So any of these seeds, a little bit put in a teacup, and boiling water poured over it, slightly sweetened and drunk, or just toss some of the seeds in your mouth and chew on them. Really cuts down on gas pain, usually pretty quickly. You like cardamom? You keep cardamom around?
I do. I love the scent, and I add it to chai teas and stuff.
Uh-huh. And do you find it a digestive aid, or do you just mostly like it because it makes your breath smell very exotic?
Yeah, that, and I just like the way it tastes in coffee and teas and stuff.
It is. It's a wonderful tasting plant.
Yes,
but it is considered a digestive aid.
Perfect.
So, and the other way to go, and I know this is like so simple. What did she say? A spoonful of the seeds and in a cup of water and fill it up with boiling water and just drink it? Yeah. As a matter of fact, a dear friend of mine needed morphine because he was in pain, and the morphine was really slowing his digestion down. And I just went out to the supermarket and bought a bottle of caraway seeds and made him caraway seed tea, and wow, even I was surprised. It really got his gut working again within an hour. Just caraway seeds from the supermarket. The other way to go is ginger. And, of course, isn't that what ginger is most known for, that ginger calms nausea, ginger calms morning sickness, ginger gets rid of flatulence, ginger warms the belly bowl, ginger makes digestion and assimilation easier for people. That ginger is a slight stimulant. And we always need to remember that stimulants don't build health the same way that nourishment builds health. But for many people, if there is digestive distress in the gut, and many people will call that their stomach, but it's really their gut, then ginger in some form can be a real ally. And if you're sitting there thinking, oh, sure, right, and where am I going to get ginger? Ginger ale is actually still made with ginger. And it's been an old remedy of old wives for a very long time. So we can trust that it really works. There's a substance sold that you can take that helps to prevent flatulence, I'm told, from a wide variety of things, whether it's coal crops or beans. And I was very interested in it, but I saw that it contained a food preservative. And I thought, well, gosh, I wonder if, because of the food preservative, if it would really, injure or harm my gut flora, which is certainly not something that I want to do. And so that's when I found out about soaking my beans with seaweed and tossing that first soaking water and then cleaning the beans with seaweed. And that seemed to get rid of most of the free sugar. Oh, my goodness. Once again, here we are, just about at the end of our time together. Well, we are going to move on. In our next time together, we will be moving into the large intestine, and we will talk about some of the heavier problems that can arise along the digestive tract. This is Susan Weed, and I wish you all green blessings.
Thank you, Susan.
Thank you, Gemini.
Please join us next week where we focus on big problems and simple helpers relative to food allergies, ulcerative colitis, and Crohn's disease. On behalf of Time Monk Radio, be well.